Finish him.
Because I think.
Towel wins. Fatality.
This video contains spoilers for both Village of Objects and Brawling on Planetary Scales. If you have not watched them in their entirety, then I suggest you do that before watching this video. The creator's channel will be put in the description, as will any music that plays during this video. This will go up to episode 2 of Battle for Planetary Scales, so development and changes that come after cannot be reported upon. This is a new series of mine I plan to make about object shows as a whole, whether it be the shows themselves or episodes or characters. For the time being, I will call this series Object Show Over Analysis, or OSOA for short. Object shows are something I am very passionate about, and I want to make these videos to express that and also give the spotlight to things that I believe have been undervalued. Given that I have a show currently in production, these videos will be light on editing and will mostly just be scripted content that can be produced at a relatively quick pace. This first episode's topic will be on Village of Objects. Village of Objects has come very far from its rather lackluster starting position. In terms of a greater narrative, it has one of the richest, and any object show that manages to finish a season is a massive accomplishment. It gives a lot of ideas to think about over the course of its run for the first season, and an ongoing second season should provide a balance of lighthearted fun and heavy subjects. There is, however, a character in the show that I believe is an accidental masterclass in writing from start to finish that seems to be either passed over or disliked. It's likely you already know who that character is based on the cover, but this video will be an in-depth analysis on Towel. But why Towel of all characters? Well, on my first viewing of the show, I found her to be a lot of fun, and possibly my favorite of the cast, and on rewatch, the amount I have to say about her is quite a lot more than I initially thought, so I'd like to elaborate why Towel from Village of Objects is, in my mind, so well designed and written. At the very base level, Towel could be described as an attention-seeking brat. In the early run of the show, she makes consistent attempts to get others' attention, and when not given it, she'll do whatever it takes to get it. Blue Rectangle, an object that is inanimate, and thus cannot communicate or emote, is her only so-called friend, which gives her the impression to those around her of being deranged. This is further aided by her confirming she was once in a mental hospital and has escaped before the show began. She is also quick to anger and will use violence after little to no warning or communication, and in the first season, this culminates in the team being split in two from how uncooperative she is with Clock. In later episodes of Season 1, she is still a relatively lonely character and does resort to violence, aided by her frustrations with Robot Towel, but she also proves to be an invaluable asset to the team in saving them from extinction. This may be a common notion that others may have of the character, and it may be what the writers of the show intended for the character to be like, though I may be entirely wrong. This, however, is not at all how I see Towel as a character, and the next chunk of this video will go up into the traits that I believe make up who she is. The first time Towel appears in the show is when she agrees with Green Screen over playing Pretend, to which TB gives her the cold shoulder. TB has a guest token here, but Towel gets upset at TB and steals the token from her before running away and eventually finding Perfume, the host. I think the intention to this is to say that Towel is someone quick to anger, spoiled, and unable to face reality. In my mind, however, I believe this is a trait of Towel's that is very strongly shown in future appearances, that being the desire to socialize with others and make friends. Towel is a very lonely character, her only friend being her own creation that is unable to do anything. When Perfume gives the exclamation for what Village of Objects will be, Towel is just about the only character in the group shot to be by herself. There could be an argument made that this isn't completely the case, but the general idea remains the same. That while most of the cast already has their friend groups and support systems, Towel has no one. She doesn't even get accepted onto her team, 5 names. She just kinda gets shoved onto it by Perfume as she's just scraps. For the challenges she's in, Towel consistently puts herself out there to try and contribute to the team, but Clock in particular shuts these attempts down. She isn't considered for throwing darts. She does poorly in laser tag, gets rejected in sculpting, wins in a scavenger hunt where she was solo, and doesn't stack cards due to being busy with hosting. The only challenge where Towel contributed to the team's victory was when she made her own team and worked without Clock and Flaggy. She has put herself in a situation where she wants to make friends and talk to others, but she doesn't have the mental stability or proper approach to be able to succeed at doing so, and thus forcing her to play at her unwanted strength to be an outcast. Unhappy, but untethered. The only other contestant that seemingly doesn't mind Towel early on is Green Screen. who doesn't exactly have positive interaction, but is willing to play cards with her, which is more than pretty much everyone else. Episode 4, I believe, shows the dualism of Towel in terms of the social game very well. She's by herself for the challenge, but runs into the other teams at different points despite them being in extremely different areas. I'd argue this is proof of her being omnipresent. When she gets frozen and eventually lost, the only reason she ever comes back is by accident, when she's brought up out of the water by OJ. Flaggy is evidently frustrated at this, maybe due to losing a challenge, or the fact that OJ somehow could play Towel for coin, but I think it's more so due to having her deal with Towel again, since she hates her. When Towel called Clock in episode 3, it was Flaggy that ended up shutting her down from doing anything else, and in episode 4, where Towel hits Kano's fatality on Clock, Flaggy oddly enough sympathizes with Clock. In action, I find strange, as while Flaggy is a compassionate character, Clock has also been implying that the only reason he doesn't treat her like trash is because she has use in the challenges, and essentially uses her as a scapegoat for complaining. To be sympathetic of someone like that over Towel says quite a bit about Flaggy's opinion of her. The first time in the show anyone goes to her in a positive manner is Coin, but as Towel was thrown in a portal for several weeks by Coin, she does not accept this. It is strange to me that Coin would want to welcome Towel at all, since he clearly doesn't like her. Blue Rectangle, after gaining sentience, says he doesn't enjoy Towel's company, though he also went to her for advice and still has moments of willingly sticking with her, so those words might be hyperbolic or an outright change of view. When they get Rocks to choose someone to eliminate, Towel actually wanted to keep the Rock as a pet of sorts. When her only friend is someone that she made herself, it lines up that an inanimate rock will be something that she'd want to have, making a friend group out of it. When she wins her bowling ball in episode 15, she goes to him as though they are friends, when this is the first time they even interacted with each other. 16B is likely the first sign of others showing caring for Towel, as when she tries to kill MB3 player due to Blue Rectangle's death, she's held back by Mahjong Tile and Rocket, notably two failed debuters not original contestants, but if they really wanted to, they could just stand back and let Towel kill herself. And in the earliest part of the show, I would imagine that is what would happen, but by this time in the show, Towel has become much more friendly and hospitable to the others. This is shown as fullest in 16C, where Towel first explains that she always knew that Blue Rectangle wasn't alive, and for the first time, she actually earns the sympathy of a fellow contestant, that being Mac. Later in the episode, they collectively put in trust for Towel to man the machine to stop Monitor. As Slushy points out, she is the strongest out of the cast. The final episode has her outright apologizing to Clock, initiating the conversation, and leading to Clock's own apology to Snowy. Towel never really had many friends throughout Village of Objects, and even to the end, that still remains true. Despite her best attempts, she was outcast from the very beginning, and the rest of the show is her battling back and trying to become someone who can be considered an acquaintance, someone to talk to play with, someone to not groan at on sight. She may not have her only friend around anymore, but she is accepted by her fellow contestants, and has the chance she never had before, to finally stand alongside her peers. And she takes a full advantage of this opportunity in Battle of Planetary Scales, befriending several contestants to form a team, and consistently keeping her team on good terms throughout the first 2 episodes. There are a couple of points where this isn't the case, but they will be touched upon later. I will say, however, I have never seen Towel happier than in Battle for Planetary Scales, where she is able to finally have her own friend group, her own colleagues, her own support system. Towel will do whatever it takes to be recognized by her peers, regardless of how much damage that action can cause. This is present from the very start of the show, when she steals TV's guest token, all the way up to Battle on Planetary Scales, where she gets upset that Bowling Ball and Blueberry leave her and load of dice behind when attempting to sabotage by throwing hay at them. There is also heavy persistence on not taking no for an answer, and at the beginning of the show, she would rather rip a character's heart out than accept that she's in the wrong. She'd rather let contestants withstand a storm than to call a challenge off. She'd rather put perfume hard enough to break her glass than to accept that her team lost in a challenge. She will even go up to Monitor and threaten violence just to not have a drum roll during elimination. She never has any remorse with her actions that result in being so uncompromising, without ever noticing that in doing so, she loses grasp of the thing that she wishes for most. Every time she refuses to take no for an answer, she slips further away from the other contestants, that soon no longer see her as someone to care for or listen to, but to revile and seclude. Even when she volunteers to host an episode, the only reason anyone gives her what she wants is because they need to know about the challenge rules, results, and voting. Otherwise, Towel is just in the way. Around episode 5, however, Towel starts making attempts to try being more flexible. When doing elimination, she consistently is shown with a smile, but is evidently disappointed about the numbers being down from the previous episode, and upset at Foam for thinking there'd be prizes. In her words, it's due to
holding in my urn to cause a murderous rampage, silly.
Despite Towel being quick to anger, I have my doubts she genuinely feels that way in the moment. I believe what she says is to get the attention of the contestants, and to play around as she never misses an opportunity for silliness. Episode 13 shows real growth in accepting no for an answer, as when she doesn't make it to the rejoin, she's just happy she got more than last time and that there are people, however few, that appreciate her. It is worth noting, however, that when the votes are revealed to be the most of any at the time, Towel gets sad when no one else celebrates. Considering her lack of remorse earlier in the season, it is somewhat of a surprise to see Towel show signs of guilt for such an innocent action. Her apology to Clock in episode 16D is a form of conclusion, I'd say, to her finally taking accountability for the things that she's done. And a part of that is her realizing that pretty much for the first time, how much damage she has caused to everyone around her, through having such high expectations and the violent outbursts that happen when they inevitably aren't met. Over the course of the show, she learns to be willing to take responsibility for her previous wrongs, and while she still loves the spotlight, she has gotten drastically better at respecting the boundaries of others when doing so, though even to this day, she isn't immune to overstepping. She gets rejected by Clock when wanting to team with him in Battle on Planetary Scales 1, and while she doesn't lash out in the moment, it's eventually translated to her targeting Clock during the challenge, and mirroring his own words when asked why she would do this, and I think it'll be a shame if that part of her character outright left. It's something that causes conflict and development with the people she interacts with, and also provides some welcome lighthearted energy to a show that is increasingly heavy and more willing to discuss relationship woes. Tao is also never going to be an aspirational character, even with how far she's gone. It's no secret that Tao is a character who looks on the bright side whenever she can. Blue Rectangle being essentially a coping mechanism for her is an example of this early in the show. Getting excited at the vote numbers in episode 13, and even all the way at BLPS 2, she takes a situation where an entire team is distraught and battered, and turns it into a positive outcome through stating that her team now has a numbers advantage. But Tao's positivity early on isn't always genuine. It's already been mentioned her coping through the elimination in episode 5, but even earlier than that, she's oddly positive at grim times. During the elimination for episode 4, she's consistently shown as quite chipper, and is especially fond of bungee jumping. She only gets upset at Clock for groaning during the elimination, and Monitor for trying to make a suspenseful elimination via a drum roll. When she finds out she's in the bottom 2, that's when she acts distressed and worried. I don't necessarily think the positive attitude prior was a facade, but I do think it's her way of distraction from what's going down. When she gets interrupted when trying to start episode 5's challenge, she just brushes it off and treats a statue as though it's just as good as a person. Quite fitting given her only friend. Speaking of which, in the same episode, she actually uses Blue Rectangle to erase the whiteboard. Almost certainly this is unintentional, but I see this as her trying to shield herself from the reality of the current situation regarding both her as a competitor and person, and the fact that her only friend is just barely still together. As a competitor, the host had just died, and Tao volunteered for a replacement quickly, possibly to ease the pain of losing the source of the game itself. She even does the whole battle for nothing gag just before this, to make it more lighthearted. As a person, she is still an outcast, and at this point fully known as killing multiple characters, so her standing is at her absolute lowest. During the voting itself, she even tries to console Flaggy, who got 3 votes, by saying,
"Be glad you didn't get 17.
Referencing how Towel herself got 17 votes the prior episode. This could be acknowledgement of her place among the contestants, self-deprecation, or just distracting Flaggy from saying anything about her. She keeps her eyes closed when saying this too. Towel is likely afraid of Flaggy at this moment, for she is a character to force Towel to stare at the reality of the situation during episode 3, during the challenge, and doesn't let her just brush it off. Towel also consistently is unaware of her own doings, whether right or wrong. Episode 3 also shows her recalling Object Village when thinking about who would be best to eliminate, something that no other character in the show remembers. While it seems that it technically existed, the actual content is mostly lost to time, and for the sake of Village of Objects is most likely non-canon. Towel uses Blue Rectangle being doubted as a coping mechanism. So episode 4 shows 2 different instances of this, the first being the voting, where she doesn't understand why she was in the bottom 2, and during the challenge, when she forgot that getting the marble was the goal and not another item that is never specified. The statue breaking in episode 5 may be a sign that her view of reality is finally beginning to fade, and that she has to remove herself from a fake world. Though given the fact that she tries to smuggle her way out of voting, it's clear she's still in denial. In episode 7, she clearly hasn't completely gotten the message yet, as on the reveal she got the least votes, she attempts to hurt or kill Perfume. Given that the statue was of Perfume, it could potentially be seen as frustration over having her worldview shattered, and Perfume was the face of the collision. This is definitely not intended at all, but it's fun to think about. Even by episode 13, there's still some aspect of denial in her character, though toned down. Blue Rectangle goes up to Tao to ask how she deals with such annoying people, to which Tao's response is, you just have to see things in a different style. Episode 16 is where the facade is fully broken. First with 16A. While she does nothing of note herself in the episode, Green Screen just straight up dies. Tao may not have had a different reaction from the others, but it is worth noting how Green Screen was just about the only other contestant to tolerate her, so this likely brought her closer to breaking collapse. And then in 16B, she collapses. Blue Rectangle is killed directly in front of everyone and Tao can't move. The only friend she ever had is dead and unrecoverable. It is at this moment where I believe the perception of what she previously thought to be reality finally gives way to the truth in front of her. She goes after every 3 player once she gets enough resolve to do so. And in the past, there could be plenty of reasons why this could happen. Of arrogance, immaturity, impatience, and coping. But at this time of the show, she doesn't go after MB3 player for any of those reasons. Instead, it's for retribution and the willingness to die for someone she loved. Tao was aware from the very beginning that Blue Rectangle wasn't alive, at least before the marble made him alive, but it never mattered either way. She didn't treat him any differently for it. There's not really anything past this that has much to talk about for this part of her character, though I find it to be an important aspect of who she was and how she grew out of it. There isn't a great ender for this in terms of what happens after. It's just Tao living the same reality as everyone else, and that's all that really needs to be said. Though I did say that Tao was willing to die for Blue Rectangle. That might be true of her character in general, because she just straight up is just not afraid of death. I ought to talk about that. Tao has shown several times throughout the show that death does not faze her. 16B is an obvious example of this, where she is aware that death is a possibility when going after MP3 player, but she makes the attempt regardless. In 16C, she knows the potential of death when manning the machine using as monitor, and only has this to say.
Just in case, if anything goes wrong, oh well.
This isn't a recovery center thing either. This is after the button for recovery is broken, and when you die, you are not coming back. This is still true in BOPS 1, where after the host threatens a contestant to play their game or die, Tao just asks what the prize will be. At the beginning of the show, she also doesn't care about the lives of others, as when she goes clock in episode 3, she gets mad about it. Not because it affected the challenge or her ability to help was floundered, but because she gave a shout before throwing the pickaxe and Clock didn't avoid it. This could also explain why she resorts to violence so quickly throughout the show, as she treats life as more of an afterthought than anything, and thus wouldn't understand, at least in the moment, why hurting or killing people is a bad thing. This is shown in episode 4 and 5, where she actively takes enjoyment out of the pain of others, which initially I didn't like as it felt off for her character, and to an extent it still does. But given how she doesn't understand what she does wrong and her overall apathy, it makes some sense why she would at least not care that she has killed someone. Though outright taking enjoyment out of it is something I still disagree with. She's a character that places heavy value in taking situations and making them positive however she can, and wants acceptance from her peers. To outright enjoy killing would be to completely disregard what she wants as a character. At least that's from how I see it, especially for OJ, who did nothing to her. She also celebrates in 16C despite Phone's death, which she may or may not have been aware of. If she wasn't aware, it was probably just to be happy that she saved the lives of everyone, but if she did know, it could have been her trying to console them all by looking on the bright side. Whether she knew or not is up to interpretation, but I really don't think she did. She isn't the most perceptive. BLPS 2, however, shows that she clearly doesn't see life as so disposable anymore. As when Loaded Dice kills Blueberry, she hits them with a look that screams, "Why would you do that?" Tao herself has only died once, shattering after being frozen, but it didn't seem to affect her mentally after, and as she was frozen she obviously couldn't do or say anything during that time. I find that Tao not worrying about death fits her character extremely well, and it's something I hope gets explored upon and maybe contrasted with scenes like BLPS 2, where she actively dislikes others dying. Tao is far from a selfless character, but this is the one area where she does put her own needs aside in favor of her friends. I would argue that Tao is one of the most positive characters in the entirety of Village of Objects. Some of her actions showcasing this has already been explained, like with BOPS 2 when she turns Blueberry and Bowling Ball's fallout into a positive, or when Blue Rectangle tells her to shut up in episode 12 and she just waves it off. This contrasts with Clock, who is consistently shown as having no faith in his team and is pessimistic in challenges. Clock not accepting Tao in a team with him at BLPS 1 is a way of showing that, despite both of them being much better people than at the start of the series, Clock is still pessimistic when it comes to the ordeal, outright wishing that Season 2 wasn't a thing at all. It also tends to be pretty clear that Tao is pretty bad at being sneaky with overall intentions and what she wants. She essentially puts her emotions at the forefront and doesn't have any space left for ambiguity, though this isn't always the case. In episode 2, she is given the chance to participate in a challenge, but does so very poorly. When she gets hit, she does a very exaggerated fall, when in reality, she wasn't really that badly hurt at all. In episode 5, she was said that she was holding back a murderous rampage, but it's, as said before, it likely amounts to not much more than light teasing, and she wouldn't do something like that. At least not in a moment. Her asset also seems to suggest this to some extent. As pre-BOPS, her asset is always fully unwrapped with nothing to hide. Her color is also incredibly bright, making her easily pop from other backgrounds and characters. I don't think that's a sign of arrogance. I believe that could be seen as a sign of being like a ray of positivity. Even her poses in the intro suggest her being like an open book, as she is generally seen with her arms spread apart and her body mostly fully exposed. Why she values taking life in a positive manner is unknown, but if I had to guess, it would mainly be to accomplish a couple things. That being it making it easier to potentially become friends with someone else on the show, and to help her keep her more angry and irrational side at bay. There's not really any sort of development for positivity on Tao's end. That's always been consistent, but her wanting to make others feel included and share positivity wasn't always a part of her character. In the past, she was willing to split a team apart because she wanted herself to be happy, and she was willing to alienate herself from the others by befriending Blue Rectangle, her own creation that wasn't sentient until divine intervention. By BLPS, this has changed to her being more aware of those around her in terms of keeping a positive mindset. Episode 3 has her try to rally Green Screen and Blue Rectangle to rebel against Clock, though this is for a rather selfish goal. Episode 15 has her attempt to inspire her group when they find out where her ring out is, declaring they can free them through the power of friendship, which fails. Her positivity is also reciprocated by those that she cares for, as when she can't play with Acorn or Whiteout, she's just told that she can act as their rep and to keep her head up. When she gets post-it notes as the prize for being first in BLPS 1, she just says, yay. Despite the prize being lame, it's likely that she only sees it as her team being able to accomplish something so big, because keep in mind, the only time she has ever outright won a challenge was when she split off to make her own team. In BLPS 2, there are times when Pager and Gamebro are having doubts about the team, and she reacts with genuine concern for them. At least to me, in both cases, she wanted to make sure that both Pager and Gamebro felt welcome on Kratos, her own experience with splitting off from her team coming into play. She knows where that ended up for her, quite literally dead in the water. She may not have a fear of death, but she doesn't want to see her friends have a similar fate, even if that just means not being able to socialize with them. This applies to those that aren't on her team as well, with her lamenting loaded dice killing Blueberry. So Tao's thoughtfulness in BLPS 2 I think is perfect for her as a character, given her past experiences and who she is now. So, this video has gone into detail about aspects of Tao that I have seen development over time to become a better person. Well, Robot Tao is actually quite the important character in terms of this, because Tao's growth in terms of the larger scale essentially coincides with Robot Tao's time in the show, and it gives her an opportunity to bounce off what is essentially just a troll. Robot Tao's interactions with Tao mainly revolve around copying whatever Tao does, with Tao's frustration manifesting in different ways. Design-wise, Robot Tao is nicely done, and I view the design as how others view Tao in the show. A glassy-eyed, uncompromising, useless annoyance that pesters everyone around her. I mean, what use would a metallic Tao be anyways? In the show itself, Robot Tao doesn't really interact with anyone other than Tao. The way Tao deals with Robot Towel is first by telling her off, which obviously doesn't work in the slightest, then violence, which in this case was a good idea since it won the challenge by doing that. Robot Towel fumbles a potential apology from Tao by copying her, though, in contrast to Tao, who goes out of her way to apologize to Clock one episode later. I have seen the idea thrown around that Robot Tao knew this would happen and purposely tried to make Tao mad to break the bars, but given the character, I highly doubt that. Tao does give Robot Tao some very obvious warnings before it happens, but she doesn't seem to be programmed to pick up on hints. Lastly, she just gives a death stare at Robot Tao, which shuts her up. These interactions may seem small, but I do feel like it represents Tao's growth as a character in a nutshell, from just getting mad at the slightest pestering, to finding a way to put that anger in use, to being able to show her emotions in a more responsible and effective way. Robot Tao is a very simple character, and I don't imagine that ever changing. But in terms of the contrast to Tao itself, I do think there is at least a bit here to think about. I will say the BLPS asset is something I actually don't like, since I like to view Robot Tao as a character unable to move past the flaws from Tao from early Village of Objects, and I believe changing the asset to look much more like a mature and thoughtful version of Tao takes away from that, at least in my opinion. This isn't necessarily character related in terms of personality, but I do want to bring this up because this is an analysis of Tao as a character, and her appearance changing should warrant some discussion. Her first design is as simple as it gets, really. A turquoise rectangle, and that's pretty much it. I could probably be convinced that it's supposed to be a dollar sign baked in the summer heat before it's an actual towel. But this asset is only around for 4 episodes. 5 through 9 is very similar, but we start to see some noticeable differences. First are the rounded off edges, which I can't really say relate to her arc as a character since it doesn't actually match her timing of becoming a more well-rounded character, so that's out of the question. It's still a pretty thin asset overall, but there's just a part of the bottom that seems to imply more thickness in that section. Tao has had that sort of pattern for a while now throughout the show in general, and I'm quite bad at deciphering what that is supposed to be. If it's supposed to be folded, then why is there a piece in the bottom? I might never truly know. For episodes 10 to 15, she has a visibly thicker frame, which I think is better suited for her both in the standpoint of looking like a towel and fits her character at this point, which has grown. Episode 16 has her be even thicker, with a bit of texture and a much softer green, though the general shape remains the same. BLPS has what I consider to be her best asset by far, looking fully now like a towel that has been folded. It is slightly brighter green versus Village of Object 16, much thicker, which is great because that looks like having several layers, and at this point, Tao does indeed have more complexity and thoughtfulness towards her. I also noticed that the posing for the assets goes from having arms outwardly pointing away from her to being closed in around her body. Perhaps that's a sign of her not just throwing away responsibility and taking accountability for herself. I've seen plenty of comments on the Village of Objects 4 where Clock gets eliminated, quoting a specific sentence Tao says after doing a Kano fatality on Clock. Yes, I said that earlier, but truthfully it's just really fun to say. But back on topic, a lot of those comments appear to be under the impression that the sentence Tao says is one of hypocrisy, that she herself thinks she can get away with actions that drastic without consequence. At least to me, I think Tao was never actually able to do her more questionable acts without at least facing some repercussions. This was said in Village of Objects 4, so we'll go in chronological order, going up to when the sentence was spoken. After stealing the guest token, she runs into the host of the show, giving her an immediate poor relation with perfume, and has the token taken back from her. Tao cracked the glass in Clock in episode 2, but this was an action that was in response to Clock berating her. The consequence here is relatively minor because it's just something that makes someone who already hates her think less of her. Tao's overeagerness in episode 3 has to be benched until she decides not to be, to which she gives herself poor relations with Flaggy in addition to Clock, and this is part of why the team lost the challenge. In all fairness though, given how that statue was looking, I think 2 Dents was the least of their worries. Her kicking perfume has her be threatened pretty much immediately after, and further strains her team's view of her. In episode 4, this then translates to Perfume straight up lying about why the team lost the challenge to Clock, saying it was Tao's fault, and not the fact that Clock and Flaggy couldn't make a statue that looked any good, or could handle a Tao leading on it. Then as previously stated, Clock's confrontation with Tao that leads to the quote. In my eyes, every poor action that Tao does leads to her not getting away with it in some way or another, even if it isn't immediately apparent. I'd also say this is something Tao would have said even if it was hypocritical, considering that Clock has wronged her in every single episode so far. Between not allowing her to participate for darts, calling her useless, demanding she gets off the team, which even if she wanted to, she couldn't be able to do, and blackmailing her with Blue Rectangle. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think Tao has a right to badmouth Clock. I wish I had more to say here, but in truth, most of the poses that are shown have already been talked about, and what's left to talk about is purely unintentional. That being an orange glow around her during episode 5, which to me can mean a sign of power and rage. Though, because this glow is given to everyone in the intro, it is more likely there to help them stand up in the relatively vibrant backgrounds, any deeper meaning here is probably looking into this too far. There's also a pose where she hits the colon 3 face, and I had a section in my notes that was going to talk about her relation to Cow's Cats, but honestly, I don't even think that would get me anywhere. If you want to make those connections, I welcome you to do that because I am not. There's also a pose where the way the teeth are lined up makes me kind of think she could have braces, but I don't really think that means anything. So after coming up with the idea of this video and being a part of the script, I saw that the team behind Village of Objects have commentaries over all the episodes, but this video is made without me watching them. There may be things I didn't catch that was listed in those videos, but that'll be spoken of another time. These are just observations made throughout watching that don't really work for any part of the script, so here they are. Clock throughout the early episodes is playing to win, and his early actions suggest that he wants to be shown as the clear favorite heading to any elimination. He's friendly with at least one other person on the team and shuts down the rest, making it seem like Clock contributes far more than anyone else. And for Green Screen and Blue Rectangle, no real resistance is given, but Towel is very stubborn about this. Towel's actions that make her at least attempt to give a spotlight to her is a way of working against Clock's overall strategy of muting the members that he doesn't believe have value, and in a roundabout way turn the situation around and exposing Clock for excluding members rather than including them. The first two challenges has 5 names win due to aspects out of their control, and the third challenge lose entirely due to the team's own actions. Perhaps this shows how Clock's attempts to control the team won't be successful, and despite warning, never gives the idea that he should change the kind of leadership around before he gets eliminated. There are several recommended cards that are just Kyle Busch cards, which I find amusing. Tao is the only character in the show that's spoken a language other than English, as seen in episode 2. I had part of the draft say Tao then throws Mac down the pit, which is probably an actual sentence that Robot Wars would have used, because the later seasons love to just put robots down the pit no matter what. Tao is consistently playing cards in their free time, often with green screen. She even had her challenge be a stack playing cards. There's no character in the show that has this type of playing card, but I do wish one was made to interact with Tao. I think that would be neat. I find it very strange that Tao was able to host in episode 5 so early despite being disliked by almost everyone else. And since by now multiple shows have played around with the contestant being the host for a show, I would like to see something that relates to them giving up the opportunity to win whatever prizes in exchange for having full authority over how the show goes. Or since Tao was on a team functionally by herself, it'll be fun to see them do a Mario Party 1v3 kind of ruling for challenges, where the host has a blatant advantage, but if they lose they automatically get eliminated. I find it interesting that Tao with Blue Rectangle exposed 2 of the pawns to Monocro, Monitor and a B3 player, before anyone else, but in completely separate ways. Blue Rectangle essentially detecting something MB3 said before interrogating them, and Tao pushing Monitor to act out in episode 4, being the first to question their authority. This character was definitely not written to be thought of this way, and the fact it turned out as well as it did when overanalyzed is an honest surprise. Most things Tao does in this show, at least to me, contribute to something about her in terms of core traits, both positive and negative, and almost all of it is welcomed, with the exception of the short stint in episodes 4 and 5 where she enjoys killing. I believe this character to be an accidental grado in terms of how she's written from top to bottom. Hello people, thank you for making it to the end of this. This was actually pretty fun to make, and I'd like to hear suggestions on what can be covered next. There will never be a time where I'll run out of characters or shows to discuss, so it's very open to experimentation. Also, Spells and Strikes is currently in production for episode 2, though going quite slowly. Help is very much welcomed and pretty much everything is open. If you just want to check out how an episode is built from the ground up, that's cool too. The Discord link will be down below, and there will be a special stream to celebrate it having 25 members. That's all I got. See you next time on OSOA.